And I thought, oh, well, this is weird. She's like a cell phone to the other side. So I started working with her as a cell phone. And for 8 years, every week, we spend an hour together talking to people off planet. I went through all of my lifetimes, and when I graduated, I was given a graduation gift of a new soul, and that was you, Richard. So my guide referred to me as his graduation gift, and now he watches over all of my lifetimes.
I'd like to welcome to the show Richard Martini. How you doing, Richard?
I'm great, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing great, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this and coming on the
Well,
show.
can I just say this is such a treat for me, and I've had so many people reach out to me and say, why aren't you on his show? His show is the best show. And so when Bob Thurman gave me a shout out on your show, not too long ago,
Yeah.
I was like, people wrote to me and were like, oh my God. Anyway, so I'm honored to be here. You've had everybody and their brother on your show, and you have a huge
Almost.
audience that we should all wish to have on our podcast.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that very, very much. It's been a humbling journey, to say the least, doing this show. As you can imagine, coming from filmmaking as you have as well, you come from the same. You and I have walked over the same corpses, over the same battlefields. We have the shrapnel from working in Hollywood for many, many years. From there to the spiritual space is a large, large jump, and
Leap.
very, very large jump. And from a filmmaking podcast to a spiritual podcast without having a spiritual awakening, near-death experience, gone to the top of the Himalayas, truly just curious about what we're talking about. It's been a ride. And from what I understand,
I'm curious about your journey, of course, because whenever you have so many interesting people on, and then they talk about themselves, may I say, whether they're supposed to. As they're supposed to. But I mean, in my case, and of course, because I do a podcast, Hacking the Afterlife, where we talk to people, quite a bit. I have publicists reach out to me and they say, can I get my client on your show? And I say, I'm really sorry, but the only clients we talk to are off planet. So when your client is no longer here, we're happy to talk to him or her.
oh my God.
But I am curious about your journey. And I mean, I don't want to go down, I'm not deflecting, but I'm curious about how did you go from a filmmaker to a spiritual guy?
I'll give you the 1 minute, like the 60-second talk about that, because I've talked about it on the show before, and I've done other interviews that I've gone deep into it. But basically, my spiritual guide here on Earth, she's been with me for 26 years, told me I had to do a spiritual podcast. And I said, you're insane. Why would I do something like that? She's like, no, it's time. You need to do it. And I said, okay. And she's like, you have 3 weeks to put it all together. I'm like, why? Because that's Easter, and that's going to be a good time for you to launch. So I was like, I get you're insane. Yeah, it can never happen. And she's like, nobody could do that. She's like, absolutely, you're right. No one could do that, but you can. And I said, all right. So 3 weeks later, we had guests, we had a trademark. It was all done. Website, the whole thing. I did it all myself, and got the ball rolling. And that was Easter of 2021.
But let me ask you, hold on 1 second. And this is a question I ask my film students. What was your first conscious thought that you would have some kind of a connection with spirituality? And you can go back to when you were a kid. I mean, at some point,
I've always been interested in this, Richard. I've always been interested in this. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I started down that path. Didn't really make sense to me, with a lot of the dogma and stuff and the fear-based stuff that I didn't like. But I liked a lot of the cool stuff, like that Jesus guy seemed cool. He had some cool stuff to talk about. But I just found my own path, and then I was introduced to Yogananda, and then I started going down more of the Eastern philosophies, Eastern teachings, and then started going deep down that road. And she would give me books to read that just, heads started exploding, and books that were ahead of the time that I needed to read them, but started planting seeds.
You probably already know this. You maybe have talked about it, but Elvis was a Yogananda fan, and it changed his life. And
the Beatles as well. George Harrison was a big one as well. Well, Yogananda's on Sgt. Pepper, the cover of Sgt. Pepper.
Oh, I didn't realize that, of course. I live a few miles from his center that he had here in Los Angeles. Well, he had two.
Well, so just so you know, on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, on the Sgt. Pepper album, we have Yogananda, Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, and Yukteswar. All four of them are on the cover of.
Wow, very cool.
And from what I understand, each Beatle got to choose four icons to put on the cover, and those were all George Harrison's.
Wow, that's pretty good. Well, I got to tell you, in my journey, which is similar to yours, I was an altar boy, actually learned the Mass in Latin, and then they'd switch it over to English, and I was like, oh, come on, really? I have to learn this again? And my uncle was a priest, but I had this, I'll tell you, when I had a question to one of the nuns in my grade school, what up with this thing where Seth and Abel go out and populate the world, or Cain, sorry.
Yeah.
And how did that happen? They didn't have any sisters. Like, where'd the girls come from? And the nun said, Richard, you're asking too many questions, but that section of the Bible is metaphor. And I went, oh, you mean somebody wrote it to give you an example of, and then suddenly in my head, everything was metaphor. I realized. And at that moment, I turned to my parents. I said, I don't think I have to go to church anymore. And they were like, okay. They were really.
They were cool with it. Well, I mean, there's that whole, the Earth's only around 6,000 years old, according to the Bible, and that's it. And I'm like, but those dinosaur bones. Well, we don't like to talk about those.
But listen, I want to tell you something. It's fascinating, and it's been in my bailiwick, and I don't know if we were going to talk about it, but I will just bring it up. Jesus shows up a lot in near-death experiences. Now,
I say he's the hardest working man in show business. I always say that to people.
Well, I was just my friend Dr. Bruce Grayson wrote a book called After, which is really a fantastic
wonderful
book.
Bruce is awesome.
Really terrific.
I did. Yeah, Bruce is on. Bruce has been.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there you go. I have to really read who's. I have to watch anyway. Recently, he gave a talk at the International Association of Near-Death Studies, which I've spoken at quite a bit. And he revealed things that he left out of the book After. And some of the details he left out were like 85% of the people who have a near-death experience report meeting source or God, and that they use the terms indescribable joy, unconditional love, or non-judgmental acceptance. And those terms show up a lot in the flip side research. But beyond that, he said that 15% of near-death experiences, people report seeing Jesus, whether they believe in him or not. And in the past 15 years of me filming people either under hypnosis, during a guided meditation, or with mediums, he's shown up more than that, let's just say. And the former head of Paramount Studios, David Kirkpatrick, reached out to me and said, you need to write a book about these interviews. And so I did. And this book, The Greatest Story Never Told, that painting by my great uncle, Tiziano, it's stories of people who report talking to him. And I filmed people talking to him live, it's a guided meditation. It's very simple. And they say, I'm seeing Jesus. And then I'll say, how do you know it's him? Is he wearing a name tag? And then they say, I just know it. I feel it. And a lot of times they're not Christians. And they'll say to me, this is weird because I don't believe in him, but here he is. And then I go on. I take that next step. I do the podcasting thing that you do, which is I say, can I ask you a question? And if the answer is yes, then I ask the same questions. And it's something Dr. Grayson mentions in his book After. You can get objective data from subjective experiences if you ask the same questions to people who are experiencing something. Identical questions. So I can say, based on that parameter, Jesus says very often, the Bible is metaphor. When he said that, I was like, oh, that's what I thought. That's funny. The Bible is metaphor. He said, all religions point to the same garden, which is pretty profound. Then he said, you don't have to follow me, but allow me to walk beside you as we walk each other home. You've heard that from Ram Dass, where just, so here he is quoting Ram Dass in this weird way, but he says it repeatedly. So I've asked him, I'm asking somebody who's seeing him. I can't see him, but they're saying I'm seeing him here. And yes, he's answering your questions. And I've asked him, he gives an alternate story of his life, of what happened, of his journey. And it ain't in the book, but it is in my book. But he gives an alternate story. And I've asked him, why are you giving us this alternate story of your life? And his answer twice with different people was, Richard, it's not alternate if it's true. And I went, oh my gosh, that's so deep. So, you should be a philosopher. And he said, I was one once.
All right, so Richard, let me add, so let's start because there's so much I would like to talk to you about. Can you tell people what drew you to the afterlife, to doing this kind of work, coming from a filmmaking background?
Give a little context for that crazy martini guy who just told a bizarre story. Oh, but one follow up to that is, recently I was talking to a woman doing a guided meditation. She said she saw him. She's a scientist in Washington, D.C. And I always ask the same question, can he change into something more conducive to conversation? Because people, when they see him, they lose their breath, their faces turn beet red. And she said, okay, he's changed into jeans and a t-shirt, which is what he always changes into, no matter who sees him. And I think to myself, does the guy have no clothes in his closet? Like, what's going on? But in this case, I asked the question, can you see anything on his t-shirt? I'd never asked that before. Why not? She started to chuckle and she said, it says the Grateful Dead.
Sorry.
So what can I say? He's a funny guy. So my journey to this unusual topic that brought us together, which I love, I think that's fantastic, is that a very dear friend of mine, Luana Anders, actress who had been in over 300 TV shows and movies. We met at USC Film School, and we were together for 20 years. When she passed away in my arms back in 1996, she started showing up in my dreams at first, and then I could hear her voice, and then she would appear, I could see her clearly as a younger person, and then other members of my family saw her. And when they started seeing her, I thought, well, that can't be me making that up, because they're reporting the same things I'm seeing. And so I thought, well, there's got to be, if she can come and visit us, how do we go visit her? So she had been a Buddhist, so I started studying Buddhism. I thought maybe that's the key. And I ended up, as we've mentioned, meeting Robert Thurman, and I took audited his class at Columbia. And that led to trips to India. That led to a trip into Tibet. There's a fun documentary, which is on YouTube for free, Journey into Tibet with Robert Thurman. I follow him around Mount Kailash. But all those things, for people familiar with Buddhism, they know that, there's not a finite, supposedly, there's not a finite person. However, my experience was different. I was talking to my friend and people were seeing the same person. So literally, that person still exists, not as a wisp of smoke, you see? And so I dove into this work, and I ran into Michael Newton, who was a hypnotherapist in Los Angeles. And for 30 years, he had been doing these hypnotherapy sessions and gathered all of that into a book called Journey of Souls. Subsequently, after talking to Grayson and the University of Virginia, who was saying, well, hypnosis is not a valid tool of science, I found that Dr. Helen Wambach also did like 3,000 clinical case studies where she eliminated bias in her work. You're familiar with Dr. Brian Weiss? He's had 4,000 cases. So I was able to gather data which reflected what I was experiencing. And I began filming people. I asked Michael Newton if I could film people under hypnosis to see if that process was okay. And at first they said, well, he said, I'm retired. I don't really do that anymore. And then he met me and he said, okay, I'll give you my last interview, which is an odd thing to say because he was 16 years still on the planet. But I filmed him for this documentary called Flipside. And it was somewhere during that week when I was filming people under hypnosis saying the same things about, the afterlife, that somebody suggested, Paul Oren, the former president of that group, said, Rich, why don't you try one? And I thought, oh, what a perfect way to prove it fake or false. I didn't think there was an afterlife. I didn't think I would I could do hypnosis. All misnomers. Listen, if you can talk to the dead, Philip Noyce, the film director, introduced me to somebody, said, hey, this is Rich. He thinks he talks to the dead. I said, no, Philip, I talk to people who talk to the dead. So in my case, I'm now filming myself, and it's in the documentary. I'm filming myself accessing previous lifetimes, accessing my friend who is on the flip side, looking at me like, what are you doing here? How did you get here? She's surprised to see me. I try to focus on new information, stuff that I couldn't have made up. Whether it's something your grandmother is wearing, and you see them in a dream or a vision, you can revisit that vision through guided meditation and take a look at their clothing. Is it something you know? If it's not, where'd the clothes come from? You see? If you're making stuff up about a loved one, they should look the way they looked. But generally, most people, when they see a loved one during hypnosis or guided meditation or even with mediumship, that when they show up, they usually show up younger and healthier and thinner. Yeah. It's like they've gone through the CGI machine. But so in my case, I focused on, really since about 15 years now, I've focused on, first it was hypnotherapists, and I was just filming them, not asking questions. And somewhere 5 or 6 years doing that and coming out with Flipside and these documentaries, I got contacted by a medium, Jennifer Schaefer, Manhattan Beach, works with law enforcement. I didn't know what a medium was. And I asked her, I said, so what is that you do? And she explained it to me. She had worked with Bill Bratton, the former head of LAPD and NYPD, in solving missing person cases. And I thought, oh, well, this is weird. She's like a cell phone to the other side. So I started working with her as a cell phone. And for 8 years, every week, we spend an hour together talking to people off planet. Sometimes they're friends of mine, close friends. For example, I was at Carl Weathers Memorial at the Directors Guild 2 days ago. Yeah. Carl, wonderful friend. We wrote a screenplay together. And 2 days after he passed, I said to her, I'd like to talk to my friend Carl. She only works with the first name. And she said, okay, he's here. She didn't recognize him. So I'm going to look over on the screen because I put it up just in case we talked about Carl.
Sure.
I said, Carl, and I told this to his family at the memorial. I said, Carl, what is it you want to say? And he said, I had a magnificent life. Jennifer then said, was he a director? I said, yes, he was. I said, I want to ask you about Randall, his friend Randall, who is Randall Kleiser, who directed Grease. Randall put Carl on his first television show. She said, oh, okay, he wants to say thank you. And it feels like Randall put him on the map, which was true. And then I to get into it, he just said that the most important thing he said is that life is like a blink, that it happens so fast that people, and I asked him specific questions about all of his friends, from Jon Favreau to Adam Sandler, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sly, yeah.
Each thing, Sly, each thing, I used their first name. And Jennifer, for example, with Arnold, she said he's saying he could still beat him arm wrestling, which was in the movie Predator, which Jennifer didn't know until I mentioned Sly's name. And then she went, oh my gosh, it's the boxer. She then saw him clearly. Anyway, my point is this. Look, I'm not doing magic. Anybody can do this. I'm just a filmmaker. I just happened to stumble upon the idea that people have filters on their brain when they're born. Some children don't have them until the age of 8, and they can remember past lifetimes and see people that others cannot. My kids did that. I'm sure you've seen people or heard people say that. Their kids are like telling me about my previous lifetime. But Grayson noted that elderly people lose the filters too. In a study in the UK, 70% of the people, hospice care people with dementia patients, said their memory spontaneously came back. And as Grayson noted, it's like the atrophied brain kills the filters, and they see people that others cannot see. And so I've realized that basically what I'm doing is filming people bypassing those filters. Grayson talks about them in his book after, but they're filters that block information not conducive to survival, that we shouldn't be looking at, paying attention to, but sometimes we can. And sometimes we do. You know, mediums are people who have got screwy filters. The filters just don't work properly. Then you have dreams with the filters are off, and you're seeing people that used to exist. And hearing, of course, everything said in a dream is telepathic. You're not hearing sound, but you are hearing sound. And then you have people who use hallucinogens. I'm sure you've heard that, DMT studies like that, sure. Right? Taking off the filters.
Meditation.
And then we have, like I say, I've been filming for people for 15 years using hypnotherapy or guided meditation. And this is where it's really interesting. The past, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years, I had a friend reach out to me who had done a hypnotherapy session, and she was, you know, she had 6 hours. These are 6-hour sessions, 4 to 6 hours. And during her session, she had an amazing journey. And the reason I know it is because she was a total skeptic, total atheist. She only agreed to do the session because her doctor said it would be good for her to relax. And film producer, you know, sort of worked on all this. Yeah, big personality. But there she was, instantly talking to people on the other side, meeting guides, talking to an Akashic librarian who everything that she said was so interesting. But so now about 8 years later, I'm having lunch with her and I said, so do you recall? She's like, I vaguely recall that stuff. I don't really remember it. And I said, well, would you like to? And over coffee, I just said, well, let's picture yourself in a boat on a river. And we did the Beatles meditation, as I call it. And I asked her guide to come forward. And I had met them before, you see. And plus I had transcribed the session. So I'm very familiar with what they said. And we brought them all back within a few seconds, like they were waiting to talk to us. So the book, Divine Counsels in the Afterlife, and this was with her help, she knew about 20 scientists, clergy, doctors who had all done guided meditation. None of them were aware they had guides or counsels or teachers they could talk to, right. But they had all done guided meditation. So it was like they'd already bypassed the filters, you see? And so I did a Zoom session with each one. Harvard neuroscientist, Akira Wirasakura, or is it Akila? I forget. But anyway, he let me use his name. He didn't care. He was talking to his council, every person and I thought it would be a percentage, like so many would be able to access this. No, all of them. And they all met guides, teachers, council members that they didn't know they could talk to. And each council member has some quality that you've earned in a lifetime. So if you have like 15 council members, you've been around a lot. If you have like 3 or 4, maybe not so much. But each one has a quality like courage, wisdom, loyalty, creativity. Exactly. And so it's a fascinating journey. But now here's where the weird. So recently I was at the Contact in the Desert thing. You know, you've heard about that. That's where people talk about aliens and stuff. Oh, copy of my book. And, oh, there's my piano. Sorry. Close Encounters of the Flip Side Kind. All right. How to phone home. When I was in 7th grade, I was doing a science project, and my nun, speaking of nuns, gotta love the nuns, Sisters of St. Casimir. She assigned me a friend of hers who was a professor to help me with my science project, which won the state fair. Back in 7th grade. His name was J. Allen Hynek. J. Allen Hynek was responsible for writing Project Blue Book while he was at Northwestern University. He's the guy who invented the term Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And so when I saw the movie, there he is in the movie smoking his pipe. And I went, oh my God, that's my 7th grade science teacher. Well, his son is a scientist, teaches at Pepperdine, and he is quite a big spokesperson at this Contact in the Desert conference. So I took the opportunity to not only interview Paul, to do a guided meditation with Paul. I left it up to him who he wanted to talk to. He wanted to talk to his father, who was off the planet. We did an hour-long conversation where his father said like things about me, called me persnickety, weird word, because I asked too many questions. Now, I took that information to Jennifer Schaefer on our podcast. You can dial in his name, search his name, you'll find it. And I said, I want to speak to this person. She didn't know who it was. I said, I'm familiar with your son and I would like to talk to you. And we had an hour-long conversation where he called me persnickety again, as well as confirmed all the details that his son had said. The time when he felt him in the room when he was like playing with a puppy, that sort of thing. So anyway, but back to the reason I mentioned this is because people talking to their councils, sometimes anywhere from 5 to 15 people, there's people who don't normally incarnate on the planet. Sometimes that freaks people out. They're going along a line because I asked them to go along the line, left to right. Who's here? It's my grandfather, or it's this wise being, or it's an angel. I mean, they can see, they talk about what they can see. I can't see them, but they can. And then they go, okay, this is weird. Somebody not from here. And I asked the same questions. Who are you? Are you a tourist? Are you just stopping by this council? Or have you been watching over this person's life for many lifetimes? And sometimes they say, well, this person and I are friends back on my planet. And that's where I know this person from.
And that's when the record grinds to a halt.
That's right. So I know that Michael Newton's Institute, which has been around, and they've had 80,000 reports, that over 35% of them include memories of lifetimes off planet, on other planets. So your friend Rich, who is a little bit crazy himself, I ask the same questions. And so I ask, let's say that I asked this one fella, clearly not from this universe or realm. I said, have you ever incarnated as a human? Some people have. And he said, I wouldn't stoop so low. Now, the person I was talking to is a scientist, and they thought they were it was disconcerting to hear that to them. I don't know why he said that, but that's what he said. So anyway, I try to focus on new information. That sentence itself is new information to most humans who would think, really? Like, isn't this the greatest, but it's a difficult, dense place that has gravity, that there's constant fighting. If you're a warrior, you can either be on the bench or you can be in the scrum. You can get out there and you might like that. And that might be your choice. And this is the key element of what it is that I'm talking about in this, or what I've discovered for myself, which is incarnation is optional. I filmed enough people recalling their life planning process, and you can see them in the movies Flipside and Hacking the Afterlife, where people recall the event of talking to their guides and having the guides pitch them this idea. I think you should be this guy. And you say, yeah, I did that in the Viking era. I don't want to be the drunk uncle again. I don't want to play that role. And the people who are asking you say, oh, but you're so good at it. You would really be, please help me. And yet this relativity thing is that 25 years on Earth, for people on the flip side, they report it's like 5 or 10 minutes. So if you're asking someone to show up for 5 or 10 minutes to play this role that's going to teach you lessons or help you overcome actions or karma that you've had in previous, they can help you. You may say yes, but you can opt out, defer, or say no. And that is, as you know, contrary to the whole idea of being trapped on a wheel that we have to get out of. Because if it's optional to get off the wheel or to get on the wheel.
Yeah. So to my understanding, after all of my research of interviewing so many people in this space and from all walks of life on the show, I understand that it isn't that you have to come back, that you eventually choose to come back to clear up karma, because it's a debt that you have on you. Whether you want to deal with it now, 500 years, 1,000 years, 20,000 years, up to you. There's no real time on the other side. So you choose, but you eventually want to choose because you want to go to the next level. You want to evolve, and you can't evolve without incarnation. Well, excuse me, let me rephrase that. You can evolve without incarnation, but it's a slower, this is completely a PhD level experience where you're going to learn a lot very fast, very intense, where it might take you 10 to 20 times that time on the other side. That's my general understanding. Would you agree?
Let me give you a lovely quote on that, which came from somebody saying, the Earth experience is the show. It's like being in the major leagues. You can spend 500 years on some boring planet where nothing happens, but you can learn more from tragedy in one day on Earth, spiritually.
If you're enjoying this conversation, I invite you to go deeper down the rabbit hole with me on Next Level Soul TV. It's packed with exclusive content like live special guest Q&As, daily podcasts, commercial-free access to the entire Next Level Soul catalog, early access to episodes before they air, and special meditations you won't find anywhere else. We will be adding new exclusive content every month, plus you can connect with me during my monthly live streams. Just go to nextlevelsoul.com/subscribe and join our soulful community today. I'll see you on the inside.
Than you can in 500 years on some boring planet where nothing happens. Now, our experience is like, give me the boring. I just want to chill, like no more drama. Yeah. Okay, that's optional. But all your friends, and this is the other part, which is when you choose to come on stage, you aren't by yourself. You have a whole theater of people, actors, who are volunteering and saying, I want to play your grandfather. Really? Yeah, I want to play your best friend. I'm going to play that role that's going to hit you in the car, that makes you get out of your journey and do something else. So can I play that role? Or you cast them and you're like, yeah, you and you and you're great. Anything you want to do is great with me. Like, what do you want to learn? And your counsel is in front of you while you're pitching your life. I mean, I have one guy in Hacking the Afterlife. He saw the journey as, he said it was like being in the Akashic Library in the microfiche section, and he was scanning through all of his lifetimes, stopping and going, oh, I screwed that up. Yeah, I want to learn that karma. I want to fix that. Yeah. And then he went out and pitched, and he said it was like standing in the Hollywood Bowl. And he was pitching to this front row of counselors who were all kind of, doing that thing of like, I'm not so sure you said that the last time. And then everyone in the auditorium volunteering to participate, and
is that the soul group though, or is that something else?
The counselors on the front. Yeah. Well, I try not to use that term. I know Michael Newton used it a lot. Soul group. Problem with it is, being a musician, soul is a great word for music and a great word for food, of the heart. But I prefer the term conscious energy because we only bring a portion of who we are to the play. That the rest, so what everyone reports, that the rest of us is back home going, good job, or no, not that person, rooting for us. And of course, you wonder, like, why are they not here when I really need them? Or why am I not here? But still, so soul groups are really like these different, I call it a classroom. So for example, you remember going to grade school, you had homeroom and everybody took attendance. And I know where you were in the alphabet, and I know where I was in the alphabet, and you go down the thing. And now those people in that classroom, some of them are your friends, some are not. And then you might wind up, being in another class with them during the day. You might play sports with them. You might become best friends with them, but they are just your classroom associates. And those guys may all, girls and guys, they may all signing up to learn lessons that you're learning as well, and with loyalty or courage or whatever. And people talk about the themes of the classroom. But, in Michael Newton's terms, he used the word soul group, but it got people crazy because they would see like people they hate in their soul group, and they'd see their family like somewhere else, like an affiliated group. But think of it as a homeroom. In the homeroom, you got all these people. And then when you go home, you got the family and the remote control and, playing basketball with your brothers, whatever.
Right. That makes a lot more sense. That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. It makes a lot more sense than that because, there's a lot of people who are like, okay, I'm going to be your abusive uncle this year, this lifetime, or your mom. I'm going to abandon you as your mom because you need to learn this lesson. And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around that.
Oh, absolutely.
That idea.
Especially when it comes to, I'll give you an example. I mean, this is the tough topic. I have a friend who said, I want to do one of these sessions. And so we drove out to Claremont. Scott DeTamble is a friend of mine. Light Between Lives is his place. Anyway, and so on the way there, she said, Richard, I never told you this, but I was molested as a kid. And I was like, what? I knew her family. I was like, wait a minute, why? How come I didn't? And she said, well, we're going to be doing this 6-hour thing and it might come up. I went, okay. So she put it on a list of questions. Like, she didn't specifically say this. She just said, what's up with this relationship? And so now here we are 4 hours into it. And Scott says, okay, what's up with this relationship? And she said, oh, I see. I'm a teacher of a classroom on the other side. And this person is one of my students who came to me and said, I really need to learn this lesson in negativity. Would you help me to learn that lesson? And so I agreed that this would be a way for him to learn the trauma that he caused, because you experience all the trauma that you cause when you're in your life review. And then afterwards we're driving home and she said, oh my gosh, I have spent thousands of dollars on psychotherapy over this. And in the moment that I realized that I planned that play, it all disappeared. It dissolved. And so I've heard that so often in the research, which is, we're playing a play, a character on a stage. Nobody can hurt you on stage or in a movie. A lot of people get shot up in whatever in a movie, but then they, cut,
get up,
and they get off the makeup, and then they see the person who shot them, and they're like, hey, you want to go get a beer together? And then they'll say, oh, you overacted on that. I felt that was really kind of creepy what you did. And you're like, wait a minute, you asked me to play this role. I mean, you're the one who called
playing it.
Yeah, you're upset. Romeo doesn't say to Juliet off stage, like, why did you drink the poison? Or Othello or Iago or all those characters. Sure. And it does bug people when I say it, because my wife included, it's just not just a play. Try not to just say that it's like as if that wasn't.
I say it's a game. I say it's a play. I say it's a movie. I mean, Yogananda says, all I see in life is movies. That's all it is. That's all this life is for me, is a
Good
movie.
Point. Yeah.
My favorite quotes is like, people get so caught up with what they see in a movie theater, what they see on the screen. They get emotional. They get tore up by the action and the horrors they see, or the heartbreak, or this thing, and they get caught into it. He goes, but what you need to do is change the focus from the screen to where the light is coming from, and look at the projector and look that way and see where the light is coming
that's
from.
Brilliant. Yeah. Because what are they? Ones and zeros. Here we are, ones and zeros on a monitor talking about these profound things. I'll tell you, I went to see West Side Story revival in Broadway. And somewhere in the middle of, I don't know, the second act, I found myself crying, tears coming down my cheeks.
Sure.
And I thought, what am I doing? I have seen this a million times. I know it's happened. But I realized in that moment, I was involved with the human drama, and it caught emotions. And then the actors and the writers and all of that is in that emotion creation, so that we can share that moment of catharsis. That we can go through it. And so this will apply to you in a small way, which is, when I did my first hypnotherapy session, like I said, I didn't think I was going to get anywhere, but here I was talking to my counsel, And so one of the questions I had asked, in case I got anywhere, why did I choose me? And suddenly I was saying, oh, they're telling me that that I said that I thought that I could help people, heal people with film. I said tears require catharsis, but they inevitably change the disposition of a person. But you can heal a person faster with comedy because it'll change their disposition instantly. And Robin Williams, of course, has proven that many, many, many times, to heal people. But and then I said, I just wish I had chosen somebody more successful at it. And the hypnotherapist laughed and my counsel laughed. And I could hear laughter on both sides of the veil after I said that, which was so strange, to hear the therapist laughing and, my counsel laughing. But now I realize, and that was about 12 years ago, and now I realize, it's not about that. Bonum populatum. It's not about the vanity of the success. It's about focusing your work like what you're doing now. Like you were born to do this. And before you even got on stage, you went, I can do that. Alex, I'm going to do that.
I'll tell you what, Richard, it's so fun talking to another filmmaker because both of you and I, again, like we've walked on similar paths, is that as a filmmaker, I always wondered why I got so close. I was in the room multiple times. I was talking to the biggest movie stars in the world. The projects were going to go. And I kept going, why did this thing always fall short? Like, why? I mean, I had chances to direct big things, big TV shows, big things. And I'm like, it just always fell through. I'm like, I have more than enough talent. I have more than enough experience to do this. And I'm not being cocky. I'm just being realistic.
I know what you're talking about. Of course.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, why is that schmo getting it? Or like, and the worst is because I had a post company. So I would have, a 23-year-old filmmaker who got $3 million to make their first film. And I'm fixing it for them in post because they had no idea what the hell they were doing. So frustrating. And I always wondered, I'm like, why would the universe or God give me this urge to do this stuff, this love to do this? Because it's a love. I mean, it's something you're infected with when I first saw E.T. is when I got it. Wow. And that was the first time I was able to I need to be a filmmaker. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to tell stories, all that stuff. Why would they give it to me and get me so close so many goddamn times and not give it to me? What's the purpose? Is this just a life of abuse? Because as you know, as a filmmaker, we're one of the most abused creatives out there.
Well, I can say it's this. I've had, of course, the same experience. I mean, I was fortunate enough to write and direct about 9 feature films, all of which you've never heard of. But some had like that moment, that window of like, oh my gosh, it's going to go here and it's going to be this. It's going to, okay. And I had the same thought many times, which was like, okay, this is strange. Plus, I mean, there were films that I made that went on a shelf because somebody forgot to sign the contract.
Oh, yes.
And so you kind of go through that. But listen, once you step off the stage, once you get into the balcony, and when you can do it through hypnotherapy and you can do it through guided meditation, but once you get on the balcony and look at the actor as you on stage going through that stuff, you realize that your guides, your teachers, and yourself who had a hand in saying, listen, I want you to learn these things. I want you to have the ability to tell a story in this way. But I need you to focus on this because it's going to change the planet. It's going to change consciousness. It's going to heal people. So I applaud you for doing it.
Well, I appreciate that. But then looking back, and that only happens when you have been on the planet a few years, where you can look back and just look at it all. And being in the film industry for close to 30 years at this point, and then becoming a podcaster in that space, I'm like, well, wait a minute. My podcast would have never been, my filmmaking podcast and screenwriting podcasts would have never been successful if I hadn't gone through all of that. Because I was talking like a veteran who's got shrapnel and I could talk to anybody, Oscar winners, because we all do the same thing. I don't care how big you are. There's a camera, there's an actor, there's a script. We all go through the same problems. It's about, I don't care if it's $200 million, it's $2. It's all the same.
I worked
without that, right. So if so all of that that prepped me for that show. And then based on those 750 episodes or 800 episodes I did, or 1,000 episodes I did of those shows, prepped me for this. And then now as I'm moving forward, going down, because I wouldn't have been able to do this show without that show. It just wouldn't have happened.
Of course.
So now all of that starts to make more sense. And you're like, oh, but I also kind of needed the background of a post guy, of a director, of media, understanding all that, because that's where we're all going. And without that information and that knowledge, I wouldn't have been able to start the show in 3 weeks without the technical knowledge I picked up along the way. So then so when I look back at it, I go, oh, this was all perfectly orchestrated. I might have not been happy with the way it turned out, but if at 26, I would have gotten that big job, that was a $20 million movie working with.
We wouldn't be talking.
We wouldn't have been talking. I would have self-destructed. There's no question 26-year-old me would have never been able to handle the success of, like, that's why I'm in awe of sometimes when you see these young directors who have these monster hits. I'm like, how do they handle it? Like, it's so much energy. But anyway, that's the way, it's all perfectly structured that way. So, and understanding now, obviously having all these conversations over the years with people on the show, explaining to me the other side, explaining to me the divine counsel, the soul blueprint, why we're here, all that kind of stuff. It all starts to make perfect sense.
So, but let me ask you, if and I'm the same way. Of course, I have projects that are still out there, still knocking on doors. I have an agent and all that stuff. Now, let's pretend they offer you a picture, which now puts you, and would you just walk away from all of this work?
No, because there's a different thing now, because I don't need that anymore in the way that I needed it before. So in other words, if tomorrow Hollywood knocks on my door and goes, hey, I have $100 million project. You could do whatever you want. You have you're Chris Nolan. You're Chris Nolan right now. You've got a blank check and you make a movie about Oppenheimer.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes no sense whatsoever but that's the genius of Chris Nolan. But if they gave me that, I know from my experience that isn't what I'm going to get. There's going to be strings attached. Sure. There's going to be people on top. But it's $100 million. And you don't have the juice or the clout that a Chris Nolan does. And everybody, no matter how big you are, unless you're James Cameron, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Who could do whatever, who could ever do whatever the hell they want.
But let's talk about those two guys for a second, which is, one is Interstellar, which of course is based on science, as you know.
Of course. And spirituality. And spirituality.
Very much so. And, the whole thing of the Tesseract and coming back, and, it requires you to realize that he was the angel, the ghost that his daughter was seeing in the library. And so once you allow that that's possible, then that takes you over to Jim Cameron, which is, if I know people who work with him, and I've heard it many times, Terminator was a dream that he had. Absolutely. He saw all the aspects, but the Avatar and the world of the Na'vi is all part of something that he's aware of, that he's had multiple dreams where they've taken him to other dimensions to show him this material. Now, I'll just give you one unusual. It's like when Jennifer Schaefer reached out to me, this medium who works in Manhattan Beach, jenniferschaefer.com. She, we were talking, she calls me up and I say, well, what is a medium? And I didn't know what that is. And she said, oh, I help find missing people. And I went, wait a minute. Do you want to work on the most famous missing person case in history? And she went, I'm in. Didn't even ask me what it was. So I took my camera over to her office. I thought, it's a great way to prove whether she's accurate or not. And for 3 hours, I talked to Amelia Earhart, who I had spent 30 years working on her story. Mm-hmm. She was telling me things not only that I knew that no one knew. I had just come back from Saipan, where she had been incarcerated. Those details, she told me things I couldn't know. For example, I asked her, so how did you die, Amelia? And Jennifer said, she says dysentery. And I said, oh, okay. And then she said, without me asking, those two GIs who dug me up only found an arm. Now, I knew that there was an obscure book in 1963 by Fred Gerner, which said these two GIs had dug her up in Saipan during World War II at the request of their CO. Nobody really knows that. It's just not common knowledge. But I said, what? Wait a second. They only found an arm. I get off this meeting. I'm driving away from her office. My head is swimming. Did I just talk to Amelia Earhart for 3 hours? Phone rings. It's an NTSB investigator from Seattle who says, Rich, I just spent 5 hours with this top secret material. Everything you've told me about Earhart is accurate. It's in there. He said, except when they dug her up, they only found an arm, which is literally what I had just heard from Amelia herself. And about 6 months later, I found an article in the Chicago Tribune, 1977. These two guys said, when we dug her up, we only found a partial rib cage and an arm. Anyway, my point is, you can hear new information from people off planet if you ask the questions, if you focus on that material.
So one thing I wanted to, so we were talking about James Cameron, who's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. And I always tell people, like, when Avatar was created, and it's going to go into what we were talking about on the other side in a second, when he created Avatar and he walked into the studio and said, hey, I need 300 million, 400 million to build this, to take this risk on building this new technology, all this stuff. I go, there's no other human being on the planet, literally, no one, not Spielberg, not Nolan, not Peter Jackson, not George Lucas, nobody who could have gotten that deal. There's just nobody on the planet who could have been given a blank check, essentially, to develop a new IP, to develop all this stuff, to do what he was supposed to do. And I would say that there's no other human being that could bring that story to the world the way he has brought it, because there's nobody else who has the wealth of technical knowledge and heart and writing capability, all the things that his counsel probably has to create that. So that idea was given to him and brought to him because there's literally, you always tell people, like, could Martin Scorsese have made Avatar? He would have made a pretty interesting one. Could Spielberg have made an Avatar? He'd probably make a pretty
that story of how Jim got the film Titanic. He brought a 40-foot model into the boardroom at Fox. And he said, Romeo and Juliet on that ship. And that was the pitch.
That's all it was.
And they went for it based on that, but they saw the thing. Well, I was going to mention this thing about Jim, which is he was good friends with my friend Bill Paxton. And Billy and I knew each other when our careers began. Yeah, and his rocketed off and mine, whatever. But we stayed friends. And at some point, while I was filming Jennifer, talking to Amelia Earhart, she said, somebody's here named Bill, and he wants to talk to you. He had passed away a few days earlier. My head was spinning, but I asked him about 20 questions. Only he could answer. Where did we meet? What were you doing when we met? He was doing Aliens. What's it like over there? And she said this, he's showing me he's in a bathysphere and we're traveling down in the ocean and she didn't know who he was. We're going somewhere and I'm seeing a ship, and Bill took that trip with Jim down to the bottom of the ocean many, many times to go see the Titanic. I mean, of course, he filmed it once at one point. But so I took that and I had 2 other mediums. And one time I wasn't even there. I just had them ask the same questions. I wasn't in the room, asking Bill the same things. And so there's a movie called Talking to Bill Paxton. It's on Amazon. And it's unfortunately shot in cafes and restaurants and wherever I was, because I ran into these people and they go, your friend Bill is here. And I'd be like, oh, wait a minute, let me turn on my camera. What does he want to say? Can I ask him some questions? So, it's interesting because Jim and Bill were very close. And initially when Bill came through, he was saying to me, you need to reach out to Jim. You need to talk to him. There's a project that he wants to do. And I want to tell him he needs to blah, blah, blah. He had all these things for him. And I was like, dude, I have no idea how to reach him. So who knows? Maybe he's a fan of your podcast. So all they got to do is watch Talking to Bill Paxton on Amazon, and you'll hear what Billy had to say.
Richard, I'll tell you something. I've had people reach out to me or tell me that they're fans of the show, that my mouth dropped to the floor. Like, I can't believe that person watches me.
And probably right about that.
And that happened in the filmmaking space for sure. I would have filmmakers who would reach out to me like, I've been watching you for years now. I'm like, are you at what? Like, are you what? You're watching me. It mind blowing stuff. But on this show, I have friends of mine who are like, oh yeah, I was just talking to this person and this person, and she was telling me that she saw me on your show. I'm like, what? I grew up with her. Are you kidding me? Like, what is it? It happens all the time. So I completely have the belief that Jim or his wife or someone would watch this. Steven's people will watch it one day. Someone will watch these shows and reach out. I think that'll happen. But
I hope so.
Insane. It's insane.
As I found of saying with Jennifer, because my audience is a lot smaller than your audience, but I try to say to Jennifer, we're working for 100 years from now. So 100 years from now, people will dig up our podcast and go, oh my gosh, these people had it right. You can talk to people off camera, off stage, and you can ask them questions and learn new information from scientists who have now a perspective of how to heal the planet that they didn't have when they were on the planet. That's what makes this worth doing.
So, Rich, let me ask you, I want to dig into the Divine Council a little bit, because the Divine Council is something that I've talked about a lot on the show because of the near-death experiences. We talk about them, but I'm familiar with the Divine Council. I'm familiar with the Life Review. Anything a near-death. I've done like 110 near-death interviews. So
wow,
I've done plenty. But with the Divine Council, we really haven't dug into them really deeply. It's always just like, wise figures or light beings or something.
Yeah.
Can you dig in a little bit on, we have talked a little bit about the purpose of them and where they come from, but what other insights can you give us on the Divine Council in a soul's journey here, what they do specifically?
Let's see if I can.
And the other characters, by the way, I would love to talk about the spirit. What's the difference between a spirit guide and a Divine Council member? What is the difference between angels, angels, and then just other souls that hang out?
All right. Well, let me just give you a really quick, what'd you say, a 1 minute overview? Yeah,
60 second overview.
So people come into existence somewhere off this universe. That's what people say. Like one guy described it as two photons come together, and then we watch over them, a little bit like the movie Pixar, Soul, the Soul movie from.
Yeah, okay. Great movie.
And watch over the souls, but by the way, was inspired by Joe Ranft, who had passed away, a Pixar founder, and he's told us on our podcast that he was instrumental in that film. But so now you go through those classes, we talked about them, or you go through your university and you incarnate and you learn things and you overcome, and eventually you graduate. And I asked a guide, so what is that about? And he said, well, I went through all of my lifetimes, and when I graduated, I was given a graduation gift of a new soul, and that was you, Richard. So my guide referred to me as his graduation gift. And now he watches over all of my lifetimes, and I can ask him to join and show up. And again, because time is so different over there, it's not like a big deal. Remember, 25 years is like 5 or 10 minutes. So we can talk about all of my journeys, let's say. And then you graduate from being a journeyman to being perhaps a guide or a teacher or a council member. And now remember, each guide, teacher, council member has their own guide. They have their own teachers. They have their own council. So it goes on and on and on and up. Councils have councils. It's very strange, but you can ask these questions to council members. So what I saw that in Michael Newton's work, he talked about these wisdom makers, and then they started showing up as they have in your work. And I thought, well, why don't we ask them questions? And so I sort of honed it down. And in the book, Divine Councils in the Afterlife, I give a very simple guided meditation where I ask a guide, is it okay to talk to the council? And then I ask, are we inside or outside? That's the next question. And people will sometimes say, I'm in a grove, or I'm in a cathedral, or I'm on outer space, but it's like a place. And then I'll say, how many people are here? And the average is between 5 and 15. If somebody says there's like 1,000 people here, I'll say, okay, well, can we talk to your council? Your guide knows what I'm talking about. Is it okay for you to talk to your council? Sometimes, rarely, people will say, they're telling me no. It's not information I'm supposed to know. Rarely. But like I said in the book, Divine Councils in the Afterlife, everybody. And then I say, okay, let's start with how many are here? and they'll say, oh, there so many are sitting in chairs. Sometimes they're in a circle. Sometimes they're sitting on different rocks, whatever, by a tree. I'll say, go to the person on your far left. Let's ask them. Now, is that a male, a female, a light? Sometimes I'll see a light, and then I'll say, okay, it's hard to talk to a light. So I'll say, can you manifest as a person or some kind of avatar so we can have a conversation? And they do. And then I can say, so what's a name I can use for you, or a letter? Because sometimes they'll say, my name is too hard for you to comprehend. So a letter. Okay, X. My name is X. And then I can refer to them. And now we go down the row, and each council member, I say, how did you earn this role on this person's council? Because that's how they got there. Each one represents a different quality, like the 7 muses. Each one represents a different quality of your journey, not everybody's journey. But then I can ask.
Kind of like Inside Out?
Absolutely like Inside Out, except those are
without emotion.
Well, those are stage experiences, right? As opposed to courage. Well, correct. But let's say the first person I talk to is courage. I represent courage. And then I can ask, so how did you earn that role? Did this person have a courageous lifetime? And they'll say, yeah, as a matter of fact. And then I'll say, can you show it to them? And now the guide or the council member is showing them a lifetime back in the 15th century when they went over the cliff and, saved the whatever. And the person gets to see that and experience that. And then I go, let's go to the person on your left. Now, listen, people have retained a certain amount of their ego. So some council members find this inappropriate to hear me, Rich, come up and ask these goofy questions. So I always start with, can I ask you a question? And then the answer lets me know what kind of questions to ask. Really? I'm busy. Do you really have to ask me a question? And then the next person goes, and I kid you not, I always ask, are you familiar with me or my work? And most often they say, yes, Richard, we are. And I go, how do you know about me? Because this person I'm talking to has never heard of me, never read any of my books. Mm-hmm. How do you know? And they go, and I go, is it like around the cooler? The council cooler? Are they talking about? And I've heard this more than once, which is we've heard that you go around asking a lot of questions. We're talking about it. And sometimes on a council, somebody will say, Richard, I talked to you a year ago, in your world. I talked to you before when you were talking to somebody else. I'm the same person, but on a different council. You see? And so the other thing is council members so let's say they represent courage. I'll ask, do you represent courage on other councils? Sometimes they say, yes, a few. Sometimes they say, 5, 10, 20. Sometimes they say 10,000. Sometimes they say more than you can imagine. So these councils.
So they moonlight on other councils is what you're saying.
Absolutely. They moonlight. And sometimes they don't represent the same thing on other councils. They just show up and they're like really wise people. So look, how often do you see a council? Well, anybody can see their council today, now, if they want to. But in general, the process is before you incarnate, they go, so tell us, what's it going to be? How's it going to work? What are you going to accomplish? And you swear that you're going to accomplish what you were set out to do. And now for them, it's 15, 20 minutes later. For you, it's 75 years on Earth. And now you go back. So you beat them before you show up and you meet them when you leave. And they go, so how'd you do? And you now go, oh my gosh, I was so great. I donated money to people. One guy said, they asked me, who did I help? And I said, oh, I gave a percentage of my bank account to charity. And they said, no. Who did you help? And he was like, I don't know what you're asking. And they showed him. He was on a bus and a woman was crying and suicidal. And he put his arm around her and said, everything's going to be okay. And that moment changed her life, changed her family, changed her trajectory. So you don't really get to see the good that you do until they show it to you. David Bennett, terrific book, Voyage of Purpose, about his near-death experience, University of Virginia, studied him. You probably had him on the show. And he talks in Hacking the Afterlife, that journey. But if you remember in his whatever afterlife review, his life review, he had two experiences. One was a really happy one, where this cranky lady constantly was bugging him, and he really determined, I'm going to make her laugh and I'm going to make her smile. And he did that. And they showed him how that changed her family and their children. So that reflective, like almost like a wave that went out. But they also showed him when he got in a bar fight in Texas with some guy who would come on to him, and he said to the bartender, like, you let these guys in. And that caused a terrible fight. And he had the experience of, a first person of being the guy beaten up and experiencing that humiliation and that trauma, which is what people report in their near death, in their life review. So if you've been a rotten person, you're going to see that in your life review, but you
feel it
at firsthand. So think about how difficult, like Kenneth Ring, Dr. Kenneth Ring talks about a guy who saw himself in one of those accidents where the guy got out of his car and started beating the heck out of somebody. But in the life review, he was the guy being beaten, and he could see himself looking down. He could taste the blood and the humiliation and the broken teeth. And that trauma, it's not like people get off scot-free. People all do go home, but you will experience all the negativity that you've caused. So no time like the present to go, hey, let me fix that.
Right. So then with guys like, Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great, what is that life if you could?
Now, why would you mention Genghis Khan?
Because he was one of the greatest mass murderers of all time.
Okay. So I get the Hitler question quite a bit. I'm sure you do too. What about Hitler?
Sure.
So I always say, look, I wouldn't want to talk to him in life. Why would I want to spend 5 minutes interviewing him on the flip side? So during one of our podcasts, and you can search for it, Hacking the Afterlife, Genghis Khan, Jennifer said, Genghis Khan is here. I'm like, do you know who that is? She's like, no, but he introduced himself. And I said, okay, I know. I said, what are you doing here? And he came to tell us about the process. He said that, I said, so why were you so nutty? He said, he had a mental illness, and the last 7 years of his life, he didn't sleep. So he was so paranoid constantly of being attacked that he just murdered everybody that came near him. And I said, so what was your life review like? And he said, it was awful. And then I've had many lifetimes since trying to recover from it. He said, I even tried to be a monk in one life. That didn't work. And then he had other lifetimes. And I've heard this from another person who caused a lot of mayhem, that he wound up in a Japanese prisoner of war camp in World War II. And all the terrible things that he had done to other people happened to him. So that doesn't mitigate that he killed 40 million people in Asia in 1277. But what's fascinating about this tale is that I asked him where he was buried. People don't know. And he told us, he said, I'm not. They cut off my head and threw it in a lake, and they buried my body in the sand so that no one could find him. And it is a mystery, like, where is Genghis Khan buried? It's just one of those goofy things. But according to him, from the source, listen, it was a mind-bending thing. I knew enough about him to ask those questions about his journey and his life, and that 1/5 of Asians are blood related.
Yeah.
And he said, well, let's hope they have the good qualities of mine as opposed to the bad ones. That was his joke. So even Genghis can tell jokes on the flip side.
I want to ask you something, Richard, from your point of view, because you have such a depth in this space. I've been told multiple times about this concept that took me a while to figure it, to wrap my head around, that there is no past life or future life, that all lives are happening at the exact same time. And
I know, I've heard that too. It's not linear. It's kind of like a plate system, records going up and down. What's your take on that? Let me clarify that, because I've asked the question many times, including to people who said that while they were on the planet, and to say, okay, is that your experience? And Dr. Grayson points out that even people who have near-death experience who say everything was simultaneous, there is no time, they had sequential events that happened. Like first I saw my mother, and then I saw my father, and then my pets came to see me. Things happen in sequence. So I asked the guy to explain it to me. He said, well, think of a string in front of you, and on that string are all your lifetimes. And they go from left to right, because otherwise you wouldn't learn anything. It would be like Groundhog Day. You wouldn't learn anything. It would just continually go over and over, but they're in sequence and they are linear. However, when you turn the string to your eye, it looks like they're all simultaneously. And it's like a 3D chess game where you see, oh, in that lifetime in Genghis Khan land, that influenced who I am now, or these acts influence these other lifetimes. So the real thing is that people experience as if there's no time. And what they're really saying is, I had this experience where it felt like time doesn't exist. I've heard it many, many times from many different people. This idea, this rubric of 25 years on Earth is 5 or 10 minutes to them. Because I was talking about somebody who had died 160 years ago, and they had come forth and said, I think people should investigate this. And I was saying, why? It's ancient history. And they said, to you, it's ancient history. To us, it happened last week. And we don't feel, as they put it, truth sets people free on both sides of the veil. So, but the time element, I know that's what people say. All I can say is it's consistent in the data, in the research, in people who you can talk to and say, does time exist? And they'll say, well, it does exist, but so relatively different from what your experience is, it's impossible to explain it. As one person said, you step off stage and suddenly you're traveling at a frequency that's, let's say, 1,000 times different than where we're at. And if you want to communicate with someone, it's almost like slowing your supersonic jet down to talk to somebody in a VW van that has the windows rolled up on a bumpy road. You're trying to impart something, usually maybe a word, but for you on the other side, it's slowing it way, 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 way down. My wife had a dream where she saw Luana Anders, the actress I mentioned a while ago, who came to her in a dream. And my wife said, you died 20 years ago. How can you do that? And she said, think of 1111. I slow my frequency down from where I'm at to one side of a fence. That's 111. And you, because you're asleep, are speeding your frequency up so that you can communicate with me. And we meet over the decimals. We like the fence that's in between us. That's where we meet and can have a conversation. That's why the filters are off when you're sleeping, when you're taking hallucinogens, when you're doing hypnotherapy. You're elevating your frequency so that you can communicate with people on the other side. And listen, for centuries, people tried to communicate. And we've been saying, no, we can't, you're dead. I can't talk to you. Even when you're having a dream, if you say something like, but you're dead, they'll disappear. It's because your frequency is not matching theirs. So that's the key, is to allow that it's possible. And I'll give you one quote from Harry Dean Stanton. Remember him, the great actor,
of course,
great skeptic. I knew Harry very well. When he passed, I had a session with him and Jennifer Schaefer. And I said, so Harry, what was it like as an atheist to realize life goes on? He said, tell people that life continues. And I said, Harry, no one's going to believe that I talked to you. All your friends are atheists and skeptics. It's going to his memorial. So he gave me 3 private messages, health-related issues. And he had me go and tell these people stuff that only Harry could know. So they were flabbergasted. He also described his death scene, how many people were there, and how he was greeted by a child that he was supposed to have in the 60s but didn't. And the child showed him unconditional love. When I'm at his memorial, I said, how did Harry die? And this woman said, well, there were 5 women in the room, which he had said. And I said, did he say anything weird? She said, yeah, he looked at me and said, hand me the baby. But there was no baby in the room. But what Harry told me to tell people, and I'm repeating it now, believe in the possibility of an afterlife. So then you won't waste your energy arguing about it like I did. It's great advice. But anyway, that thing about time, listen, I know it's a conundrum. I know people say time doesn't exist. If you wanted to reincarnate and go back to the 1500s, you'd have to ask everybody involved, your guides, your teachers, your council members, your classmates, to take a page out of your life to go back and redo it. And all of them are
possible? Is that possible?
No, well, imagine hurting all those cats. I know you always ask to go back here, but you can go visit. You can go visit your previous life. You can go visit that era. You can actually go and step into it. You can do that in guided meditation. Just walk right back into that era, but you can't alter things. However, this is the kind of unusual conundrum. You're altering your reality by visiting your past, because when you visit the past, you see how things are not that important that you're worried about now. So visiting the past alters your present. And by altering your present, you change your future, because you're no longer worried about death. You're no longer worried about anything in terms of the props on stage. Because when we leave the stage, we drop the props and costumes and go back home. That percentage of your conscious energy that you bring to the stage, it's between 20 and 40% generally. You pack it up in your suitcase and take it home.
Richard, what about the concept of the ascended masters, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, the Yoganandas, the Saint Germains? What are have you spoken to any of them other than Jesus, let's say? Because I'm gonna have you back to talk about Jesus in a whole episode, because that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, no, it's I just wanted to squeeze him in there because he's a funny guy.
But generally, the ascended masters, I mean, from my understanding, they all have the same thing we do. They're just souls that are and I'd love to hear what you think, that they've broken the cycle, let's say, or if they decided, I've learned everything I've learned at this university, I don't need to come back anymore if I don't want to. I can go to the next place above this place. Or I love it so much here that I'm going to come back and help, like the Jesuses, like the Buddhas.
Well, the Bodhisattva vow, as you know, I will return. However, yes, have I talked to the avatars? I've talked to so many. I mean, it sounds silly to say, but yes, we've talked to quite a few. And sometimes they're avatars. I didn't even know they were an avatar. We were in a astrophysics class on the flip side. Jennifer Schaefer's father, who had passed away, was saying, I'm taking this class. And I said, oh, show it to us. And we go to the class, and there's a teacher there. And he says, now don't be, to his daughter, don't be freaked out by the teacher. And so now we get up to the teacher, and I'm the gadfly. I ask questions. Who are you? What's your story? As she reveals herself, takes off her cape, you realize she's telling me she's got 8 arms. And I'm like, oh, you have 8 arms. How do people refer to you? And she said, they call me Ma. And so now I take that research back to my Hindu philosophy people, and I say, who's an 8-armed teacher named Ma? Well, that's Ma Durga. So now I go back to Jennifer, who doesn't know what I'm researching. And I said, now, can I have your whole name? And Jennifer says her name is Ma Durga. That's what people refer to her as. Now, are you referring to somebody who lived on the earth with 8 arms? Or are you referring to a teacher that you've met on the flip side who has 8 arms? You see? So I've met Krishna. I've met people who say, oh, there's this blue person standing in front of me. And I go, what's the name he goes by? He's saying Krishna, Vishnu, Shiva, Yogananda. Jennifer didn't know Yogananda, but I wanted to ask him questions about his autobiography. Like, how did he manifest his teacher when he went back to his hotel in Mumbai and saw his teacher sitting there in his bed? Like, what happened? And he described it in great detail. We've interviewed Tsongkhapa, who was the Tibetan, who's considered a Buddha in Tibetan Buddhism. We've interviewed the 13th Dalai Lama, mainly because I've traveled extensively in Lhasa and Tibet, and I'm very familiar with Charles Bell, who was the guy who befriended the 13th Dalai Lama. And so I wanted to interview Charles Bell. And during that interview, I said, can we interview the 13th? Because you see, you only bring a portion of your conscious energy here. So if you can access the time frame, or the floppy disk, as Stephen Hawking called it, of when I existed, all the information is in that disk, all the ones and zeros, all the math. So you can access that conscious energy. So same goes with anyone who's ever been on the planet. So why are avatars different? Well, the first time that we interviewed Jesus, I was saying I'd never asked him a question before, and this was the third medium I was talking to said, he's in the room, and she was crying and couldn't breathe. And so I thought, well, this is strange. I don't sense him. I don't see him. I said, can he come closer to you? And she was like gasping for breath. And I said, can I ask him a question? And she said, he says yes. And I said, dude, what's the matter with you? Why are you causing this reaction in people? They can't breathe. Their faces turn red. They start crying. Now I asked it that way to challenge. Like, is this a belief that they're tossing at me? Or what is it? And his answer was, I brought more of Source with me to this lifetime. And when people are close to me, they feel that unconditional love of Source, which is a non-denominational answer if I've ever heard one. He didn't use any of that language, you see? And since then, he's repeated. But when he said that, I said, not so much with the Romans. And he laughed. And Jennifer said, oh my gosh, I don't know what that means. Not so much with the Romans, but he's laughing. My mind was blown. I not only was able to ask him a question, but also to get him to laugh. And so since then, and this is true of, I just want to say it, all avatars, they're not that serious of people. They know who they are.
Oh yeah. So, I know.
Buddha was probably the one who was the most unusual interview. And we did an interview with both Buddha and Jesus in the same podcast. And that's in the book, The Greatest Story Never Told, as told by Jesus and those. It's called Buddha and Jesus Walk into a Bar. And the idea is you can ask questions to anybody that's been on the planet. And you try to set aside all of the dogma and all of what you've been told about who you can ask and what you can ask. Yogananda over your shoulder. I'm sure he's been to visit you. And if you do a guided meditation, we can ask him, what's up? And what are the lottery numbers for this Friday?
Well, without the lottery numbers, I think you and I have been doing similar work, but I use channels. So channels, I had Buddha on the show. I've had Jesus multiple times on the show. I've had Yogananda on the show. I've had Baba G show up, which was mind blowing when I had Baba G show up. The energy in you could feel the room change. When certain I've had Saint Germain on the show, multiple, and I ask them just like you. I go, man, wasn't it tough walking around 2,500 years ago, Buddha, and you're trying to talk to people who just don't even understand what 1 + 1 is 2, and you're trying to teach them about these higher level teachings, and they're just like, this is ridiculous. Same thing for Jesus, and they'll go, yeah, it was tough. It wasn't easy. It was a rough go of it. It's really
fascinating. And I think it's fascinating to ask the question. We asked Padmasambhava what it was like for him to go to Tibet, and he said it was wild. And so, and I know what he's talking about because I've been to like the caves that he went to visit, and you think, oh man, that must have been the year whatever it was, 800 when he was there, 600, I don't know. Anyway, just mind-bending stuff. But the good news is, the really cool thing is, that there's no one that we can't communicate with. I mean, there are people who don't want to talk, right? They're busy. Or they find this level of conversation like a sandbox, like kids in a sandbox asking questions, like, enough already, stop bothering me. However, those ones that, like you mentioned, are who care about humanity and care about the planet or whatever, care about answering questions. I really have never had somebody say, I won't answer a question. They'll say, if I answer that question, you won't understand the answer. I'll tell you, the best question that I've heard was my friend, the Skeptics, asked, she said, I don't believe any of this stuff. I said, okay, well, you're going to a hypnotherapy session, ask a question. She said, all right, what or who is God? I thought, that's a good question. So she got to a point, she was talking to a guide, and the guide said, look, God is beyond the capacity of the human brain to comprehend. It's not physically possible for the human brain to understand. Too many levels, too many dimensions. He said, however, you can experience God by opening your heart to everyone and to all things. And I realized that was a oceanic experience comment, like a mathematical formula. it's almost impossible to comprehend. How do you open your heart, empathy, compassion to everyone? Sure. But he also didn't say just everyone. He said all things. And why would he include things? It's because everything is a construction of consciousness. So if you open your heart to everything, you see, that's when you can experience that oceanic epiphany, etc.
Richard, we're definitely going to talk again in the future. That I can see already. But I'm going to ask you I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask on by guests, kind of like a rapid fire.
Please.
A few questions.
Go.
What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Living a fulfilled life. Doing what you said you came here to do.
If you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Richard, not little Richard, but little Richard.
Yeah.
What would you tell him? What advice would you give him?
What would I tell little Richard? I would say, oh my God, he played with the Beatles and Billy Preston. Little Richard, I would say, of course, now in retrospect, I see all of the things that happened to little Richard are totally related directly to this right now, where we are. Yeah, okay. No, but right. Yes, I understand the question, but little Richard, it would be, love is all there is. I mean, that's what I've heard so many, you've heard it, I'm sure, it is true. That's the engine of the frickin' planet. So if that's love, then what more do you need to know?
How do you define God or source energy?
That's the best definition I got, and I'm glad I was able to say it. Open your heart to everyone and all things. Now, we have talked to Robin Williams a number of times. I had met him in life. I had dinner with him. Mm-hmm. And so I was finishing the book, Hacking the Afterlife, and I cut out the chapter about him because it was all about me, meeting him, and me and Robin. And I met with Jennifer the next day, and she said, Robin Williams is here. I was like, oh, really? Like, where? And she said, he's here because he wants you to put his chapter back in your book. I had not told anyone I had pushed delete. Mm-hmm. He was there in the restaurant telling her to tell me to put his chapter back in my book. So I did. And now when the book was finished, I said, well, let's ask Robin for a blurb for the cover. A sentence like, hey, I love this book. Anyway, and what did he say? He said 2 words, love, love. Meaning love yourself, love what love is, love who you are. Love is the only reason to be on the planet. So love, love. It was so brilliant. Love, love.
What is the ultimate purpose of life?
Robin Williams, I'll give him that last say, which is to love, love, to find love, to give love, to understand what love is. It's interconnectivity, it's openness, it's empathy. People describe an incredible afterlife of creating any object that you can imagine, traveling to other universes, any food, any taste, any imaginable CGI avatar experience. You can do that on your own. We had Carl Lemley show up and tell us that. And I said, so why do you come back? Why do people come back? He said, when you're bored, that's when you decide to come back. So when you're bored with creating everything on the flip side, we come back here to do what? To give love, to share love, to be loved.
And Richard, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing in the world?
richmartini.com. Our podcast is Hacking the Afterlife. If we could just get a fraction of your viewers to come over. It's on YouTube as Martini Zone. Or, I've got 12 books out there, bestseller, and they're Kindle categories, but you can find them all. And the movies are Flipside, Hacking the Afterlife, and Talking to Bill Paxton.
Beautiful, beautiful. And do you have any party messages for the audience?
What a treat and what a delight to have someone like Alex be awake in his lifetime to find the way to do this. And if for people out there who are struggling and having a hard time and trying to figure it out, just try to be open, because Alex found his way to doing the thing that he was born to do. And you too can find the thing that you were born to be.
I couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Richard. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. I look forward to our next conversation, my friend. Thank you for helping awaken the planet, my friend. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.